But who better than me?
Greetings and salutations, welcome back to another episode of the Hardcore Casual with your boy, Bass the Kid. And you enjoyed it so much last time. Baku Panther's back with me as my co-host today. Please like and subscribe, click the notifications, just so we can kind of get a few more people, checking out the channel, see all that new content coming out. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into the episode. So I guess the first place to start is the news that came out. I guess you guys are going to see this on Saturday. So Friday morning, that the IBF have now ruled that Tony Yoka is ineligible to fight Filip Hrgović due to an already contractually mandated fight with Martin Bakole, which was supposed to happen last week, I think. Or was it I think it's supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen next week on the 29th of January. But due to COVID restrictions in France, everything got locked down over there, and they basically had to have rescheduled it to say, I think it was supposed to be the 5th of March, but the fight itself hadn't actually been formally rescheduled. And from what I can tell, in France, they haven't announced what they're doing with regards to the restrictions yet. So, I mean, there is previous precedent to state that if you have a fight which doesn't have the capacity to be rescheduled at that particular time, due to whatever reason, in this case, obviously it's due to the country being locked down and not necessarily being free to move about as normal, then you should be allowed to take another fight or find another way, quote unquote, to earn a living during that period of time when your current source of income is no longer viable. That being said, I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen. I mean, hey, maybe, throwing it out there, maybe they knew that fight couldn't get rescheduled anyway, and it was more of a publicity stunt. So yeah, we'll take that fight, but knowing that you can't actually have it because you've already got this contract and it's gonna come up, which just then builds a bit more profile for that fight moving forward. Now, I'm not suggesting that did happen. I'm just saying there's always a possibility, especially since, Yoka is technically still a top-ranked fighter. We had previous with, Arum and Warren and Hearn with AJ and Fury. So I won't put it past any of them at this point. But as I tweeted earlier on, I pretty much just say, okay, cool, just hurry up and get to Zhilei Zhang and let's just make that fight happen, because so far he's called out Hrgović. I don't think there's anyone else who's going to accept that fight before it gets down to him in the rankings, so you might as well just do it. Let's get it on. Even maybe don't even have it as a final eliminator, have it just as another eliminator. Or if Zhang wins, then he has to fight someone else afterwards. But then if Hrgović wins, then he gets it as the final. They've done things like that before in the rankings. So I don't know if you can say Zhilei Zhang, if he wins, automatically should then become the mandatory, considering he's sitting in like 13th position at the moment. But yeah, anyone with a profile higher than Hrgović's currently ain't going to take the fight. As I said before, it just ain't got enough money in it. Most of them have already earned more money than that fight's worth. So it's only going to be the people that ain't earned much thus far that fight's going to appeal to. Hence Tony Yoka, who they've got amateur history. Hence Zhilei Zhang, who's got big crowds, big followings in China, but obviously hasn't made anything huge. And you could have said to a lesser extent Dempsey McKean, but he ain't taking that fight because he's not ready for them world levels just yet, as far as I'm concerned. But that's the news on that. So this weekend, Gary Russell Jr. finally comes out of hibernation. He has to face his mandatory challenger, Mark Magsayo. He hasn't been in the ring since January or was it February of 2020. So technically he's been out of the ring for the last 2 years. So he's definitely on that PBC weight loss diet. You know, 1 fight a year, 1 fight every 2 years, 1 fight every 3 years, like whatever it is, fighting in the division you're supposed to fight in, maybe once every 3 years if we're looking at Leo Santa Cruz. Now Gary Russell, he's had some issues recently, so I don't know if I can attribute all of this current time out of the ring to just not really being prepared to fight or whatnot. You know, he's had some family things happen, so I guess I'll cut him a bit of slack, but the pattern has been the pattern since 2014. So it's hard to, you know, fully just attribute it to some personal dealings that are going on thus far, this, you know, sort of over the last 12 to 24 months. Either way, he's back in the ring. One thing I will say about him, he is extremely talented, has always been extremely talented. I believe if he was more active, he probably could have been a much bigger star than he is now. But Magsayo is also a very dangerous opponent for him. Pretty heavy-handed, very busy, doesn't necessarily give you time to work and, you know, be able to sort of figure things out. He kind of stays on you. He is high pressure. Not in terms of a pressure fighter, but he's just active. He's busy. Like you don't really get much of a chance to start to strategize. So Russell, as long as if he doesn't have slippage, because he's always been pretty good at sort of adjusting and having to make sort of the necessary fine-tunement during his fights. If he hasn't suffered much of that slippage, he should be able to adjust to what Magsayo is bringing at the time, and it should end up being a good fight. Unfortunately, there's no real way for me to watch it outside of, you know, seeing it after the fact, because I believe it's on Fight, the app, and there's not enough on that undercard for me to justify spending that money at present. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. I'm not giving any predictions on that one. I'm gonna leave that one for the time being. I have an idea of who I think's gonna, you know, get the job done there. But yeah, that's pretty much that one. And as I said, man, good luck to both guys, I suppose. But let's see how much the Gary Russell Jr. still got in the tank. Now, this is a story that I guess kind of does the rounds every couple of years. I mean, these two guys, their paths have been intertwined for the longest period of time. But I believe it was on Thursday, Eddie Hearn did an interview with Umar, I believe, from IFL. Basically said that he's sent a very, very massive and lucrative offer to Anthony Yarde's team with regards to a Joshua Buatsi fight. In the same interview, also to a lesser extent, said an offer was also made to Craig Richards. Now, from some behind the scenes information that I've been given, I hear that the Anthony Yarde offer was extremely good. That's the information I've been given. I also heard that the Craig Richards offer wasn't very good. It was very much it was almost like a bait and switch. It's kind of like they made this huge offer to Anthony Yarde, knowing that realistically Queensbury aren't going to release him to fight on the zone. So you can kind of, sometimes you can make those grandstand offers because you kind of know it's not going to happen. But yeah, I heard it was some serious money, but Yarde's team say, well, we're looking for the Joe Smith Jr. fight. If that doesn't happen, then we'll come back to you. But then it's, from, like I said, what I heard, the Craig Richards offer wasn't really offering too much. So it's almost like, well, you've made this huge offer because you know that's not going to happen, but then you're really saying, well, no, like, you're going to take this fight, but like, you don't get that kind of money because you're not worth the same commercially, which is actually very funny, because out of all of them guys there, the person who does the most ticket sales whenever they're on a card is Craig Richards. Again, behind the scenes information, you know, people talk, numbers get thrown about, you see certain bits of paperwork that come out for certain fighters. You kind of, you know, you understand the lay of the land. Ultimately, I think both Craig and Josh have said that they ain't trying to fight each other unless there's a title on the line. I think Craig said the same thing about Anthony Yarde, about Lyndon Arthur, Dan Aziz. Like, unless it's a big world title, like, they want the champions, they want to have those fights. To be honest, I mean, look, Eddie's got enough money to get any of these man a championship fight if he really wants to. Like I said previously, as far as I'm aware, Joe Smith Jr. is actually out of contract with Top Rank now. I think that his last fight that he just had against Gaffrard was technically the last one on his contract. So as far as I'm aware, he should technically now be a free agent, which means Eddie can have the money to get one of his boys that shot. He could probably overpay against Frank, because even if Yarde becomes the quote-unquote mandatory, even though he's in the #1 spot now, it's like, well, at the end of the day, you know, the money talks. I'm sure he can get something put in place beforehand. And outside of that, I mean, he's still got his promotional deal with Bivol, even though Bivol's doing his 3 fights with RCC at the moment. If that means that, boy, Boatsi's got to go over to Russia and do something the same way that Anthony Yarde went over to Russia for Kovalev, then boy, you got to do that. At the end of the day, like, the whole Boatsi saga at the minute is just long. Like, no one can say that Boatsi is doing the same things that the rest of the division is doing. Now, I want to be very clear. I am extremely critical of Anthony Yarde's roadmap thus far in the heavyweight, I mean, in the professional game, sorry, the light heavyweight professional game. He hasn't fought anyone of note outside of Kovalev, and, you know, to a lesser extent Lyndon Arthur, but he's at least had that challenge. He's taken that challenge, you know. I guess at this point, you kind of have to start ignoring the whole 12 amateur fights thing, because it's the pro game now, isn't it? Like, if your whole thing is about knocking man out anyway, then the necessary amateur pedigree doesn't really mean as much, because you're not trying to outbox people, you're just trying to outgun them. But he's taken his steps to sort of at least have those. He's had a world level fight now. I mean, the Arthur fight, the first one was, realistically, it was British Commonwealth level, and the second one is exactly the same. So that's where he's sitting in terms of his best win. But if you look at Boatsi, as I said before, even though you could say, and I you know, when I had to do my rankings in the previous video, I think I had Boatsi at 3, but it was begrudgingly, only because at that particular time Bolotniks had kind of done a bit more around the European circuit than, you know, someone like Lyndon Arthur had done. But ultimately, I've still said it, like, Boatsi's best win is against a guy that got beat 5 times before that anyway. So it doesn't really stand out as much. Then you get the Vlasov pullout. Then you know, some people will know this, some people won't, but he's been offered Dmitry Bivol twice previously and turned Dmitry Bivol down twice. Maybe it's on the tip of, you know, I'm not rushing my career for you, like, I want to get it right, but there's only so many opportunities you get. And, you know, it's mad, because if Craig Richards or Lyndon Arthur or even Callum Johnson or any of these, man, if they turn down a championship fight twice, do you think they're even getting a look in at a decent level fight moving forward? Like, it feels like Buatsi's had his favour, but it's starting to wear thin now, because I've heard rumours and speculation that even Matchroom are getting sort of tired with the bullshit right about now. Turned down 2 Bivol fights, pulled out of the Vlasov fight, previously vacated the British title, the Craig Richards fight, have got positioned for the British title when Callum Johnson had it, so to make Callum Johnson vacate so he could fight Liam Conroy for the vacant British title rather than fight Callum Johnson. Like, when you start, all these things start racking up, like, it doesn't look good. So you're not really covering and currying the same kind of favour with the audience that you had previously. That being said, I guess that was a bit of a tangent compared to the ultimate story. I don't think Yard and Buatsi is happening anytime soon, especially not without a world title on the line. But I'm definitely keen to see what Buatsi is doing next, purely because, as far as I'm concerned, and this is just my opinion, how I feel, like, I liked a lot of his fights, but I can see a lot of the flaws in him and sort of how he fights. I feel like at the higher levels he's going to get found wanting, but it's last chance saloon as for me in terms of him having like something credible on his comeback. If nothing happens, then I don't really want to hear about him being in that upper echelon, and he'll definitely end up going down my rankings, undefeated or not, because the O isn't always the be all and end all of the discussion. So yeah, ultimately I'm keen to see what happens there, but I'm not hugely optimistic with regards to that. But yeah, shout out to Craig Richards. Like, I want him to get a decent fight next, not just to be an opponent for someone else. Like, let's put him in a better position to enhance, especially after what happened with the Joe Smith Jr. Situation. But yeah, moving on. So the Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury purse bid been pushed back yet again. I believe this one is now to the 26th of January. And the report is that if no deal is made by 6 p.m. on that date, then the purse bid will be called. No further delays are allowed, which is, I mean, it's a weird premise anyway, because I'm just like, well, ultimately you've got this arbitration hearing about the percentages and about fairness, so to speak, happening in March, and you've got the purse bid happening in January. That could be very tricky, simply for the fact that if the arbitrator rules in favor of Dillian Whyte, then the WBC are the ones that are liable to have to fork out the difference between the purse bid, the current split that they've mandated. So for instance, if the arbitrator says, no, it's supposed to be, it should be 70-30 because that's your minimum, and you kind of have gone against that, this is the commercial value that we believe, and you should be honouring what your general terms are. The minimum you're supposed to be allowing someone is 30%, so we will uphold that. Then the WBC are the ones that then have to find that additional 10%. That's how I've understood it. That's from a report that I was privy to. So yeah, I mean, I don't really talk too much on it because ultimately we're no closer to finding out exactly what's going to happen. Bob Evans talked about Manuel Charr being a potential opponent over here for Tyson Fury, and Robert Helenius. I will tell you now, if Tyson Fury were to fight Manuel Charr over here, that's a York Hall settings, and I don't even think it feels like York Hall. Like, I'm being legit. So if Bob Arum is thinking that, he might want to change his mind fast, quick, and in a hurry. Ain't nobody caring about that, no matter how you try and promote it. Because one thing the British boxing fans aren't is stupid when it comes to decent fights. Even the casuals ain't coming out for that, because they don't care about Fury that much, and the hardcores definitely ain't coming out for that. That will bomb in every sense of the word. So Bob, yeah, stop being cheap, and yeah, like, behave in it. 90 or not, like, you don't get that pass. I think lastly, I will end on the ongoing saga between Terence Crawford and Bob Arum and Top Rank, with regards to the lawsuit that was filed last week. So I've actually seen a lot of different videos on this, a lot of very good ones by like Ring IQ and Boxing Beats and Rhymes. If you haven't seen those videos, I suggest going over to their channels and watching some of the information that they've got, especially Beats, because he's gone very in depth within sort of this topic, and not just his opinions about Bob Arum, but historical things that have happened, which, you know, sways his opinion on whether or not Bob Arum does do his best for, you know, fighters of certain denominations, we'll say. Now, I didn't read the entire lawsuit, but I saw enough excerpts of it. The main parts of it is actually, you know, breach of contracts and sort of things within the contract that weren't honored, and those are sort of the main points that are they're really contesting. Now, what I've sort of found interesting, obviously they've put in there that, you know, there's been disgusting racial bias from Bob Arum and Top Rank in terms of, you know, promoting certain people, and, you know, that's the reason why Terence Crawford hasn't been able to maximize his money and also maximize his profile, and therefore yield a bigger return against, you know, for Top Rank against some of his opponents. Now, obviously, everyone runs with it and is like, you know, Bob, you know, so he's saying that Bob Arum and Top Rank are racist and whatnot. Now, I actually thought this previously, but I want to give him a shout out, because obviously he did mention this on his when he was on the Undefeated podcast on Monday. So Maestro A Boxing, also another good channel, a lot of good content there as well. He actually said, well, if you look at the wording, it says that there's racial bias. So it's not saying there's racism. Now, I feel like that's very clever. And I was thinking this before he said it. And when he said it, I was like, oh, okay, so someone else sees what I see. Like, in the wording, I feel like there's enough in there that if someone wanted to launch a countersuit against you, you could say, well, no, I didn't call you racist. I said you were racially biased. Because it would be easy to prove a racial bias, whether historically or currently, when you rank your sort of what you're dealing with and how you've seen someone else kind of be promoted. Like, you can prove it to a degree. Like, obviously without sort of cast iron point A to point B, point C to point D, you know, but you can get a court of public opinion. You can get even the court to look at various evidence that you project. Now, without sort of getting into minutiae of everything, I know, for instance, Crawford could say, well, a bias towards me is, even though I made more money than these people, I was always put on a different channel or a different platform to them when the fights were being shown. Therefore, they always got a higher exposure. For instance, I believe that almost all of Vasily Lomachenko's fights were on the main ESPN channel in America. Now, I'm not from over there, so if I'm wrong on that, you can please correct me down in the comments. But from what I've heard, that was been Lomachenko. He's always been on main ESPN. And Crawford, apart from, I believe, his Jose Benavidez fight, has always ended up on ESPN Plus, or like the secondary version, or behind the paywall. So you've got the ESPN that is on everyone's TV, and then you've got ESPN Plus, which is like, I believe, their paid subscription. So not necessarily saying it's a pay-per-view, but it's a paid subscription. And I guess you don't always have the same amount of eyes on the subscription that you do on just free TV. Like, for instance, more people are likely to be able to watch ITV in the UK and BBC One, as opposed to like BBC Three or ITV4, or for lack of better, like Netflix. You know, you have to have a subscription for those, whereas the others you can get on any TV regardless of, you know, whether you're paying or not, even though, you know, they can't really say nothing for the TV license people then. But yeah, so I feel like if you could say, well, consistently the people that you quote unquote talk about better than me are constantly on this channel, but I'm always behind the paywall, then that would potentially limit the audience that you can have view your fights. So again, when you say racially biased, it's like, well, yeah, you're favoring these people that maybe look like you over me. It's not saying that you are a racist, but you are being biased towards them and not in my favor. That could just be one, you know, thing that they could try and bring up. Now, outside of that, I mean, I know there's things where they say in the contract you're supposed to have had 3 fights a year over the course of, I think it was a 5-year contract, but I can't see it being 3. I think it would say like it should be 2 fights, because realistically I can't remember the last time that Terence Crawford had 3 fights in one calendar year. I think, if I'm correct, it was back in 2015 or 2016. So realistically, he's always been working off a 2-fight schedule. Now in 2019, I know there was only 1 fight he did have. So there's a second fight. You could say, well, I was owed this fight, I didn't get that. But in 2020, he had 1 fight in 2020, but I don't think he could claim in 2020 or even 2021 about only having 1 fight, simply because I remember, and obviously I'm trying to be impartial here in terms of just relaying information I know. In 2020, he refused a fight earlier on in the year because Top Rank said, well, we can give you a fight, but we can't pay you your contract minimum because the pandemic's here. We haven't got any crowds. Everything's behind, you know, it's all sort of behind closed doors. So we've got no way to generate revenue for the fight. And Crawford said, well, no, like, you're not gonna pay me less than I'm worth. I've taken the small paydays throughout my career. Now, like, I want the bag. Like, I've earned the bag, so I want the bag. So I feel like if you try to claim for loss of earnings in 2020, and even to a lesser extent 2021, you might not be able to, just because they can then point and say, well, no, you actually turned down and refused to fight because you weren't prepared to take a pay cut. Like, you had the opportunity and you turned it down. So that one, I don't know if they can claim for that. Probably can't. But 2019, I mean, is a valid case there. I can't remember the reason why he only had the 1 fight, but you know. But yeah, look, that's kind of my take on it. The case itself is extremely hard to prove in terms of the if you talk about actual racism is the reason why, or systemic racism within the company is the reason why you've been held down, you've got to be able to verify that wholeheartedly. Yeah, you could possibly look to the Floyd Mayweather situation, I suppose, where, you know, Floyd said, well, I want you to promote me to black people, like that's my people, and Bob was like, well, I don't understand this hip-hop generation, like I don't know how to promote you to them, because he was always promoting him to sort of the Latino, the Mexican American crowds and whatnot. Then what's the others? I mean, there's maybe a couple of others you could talk about, but realistically, you also then say, well, what about Josh Taylor, for instance? I mean, his promotion has been shocking, considering he was going for an undisputed title at 140, and Top Rank couldn't even secure a UK broadcaster for the paper for the fight. I think it ended up on the Fight TV app over here, and maybe a couple of other, probably a couple other territories. You could also maybe Dimitri Bivol, and when he was on Top Rank, he didn't necessarily get promoted well. Artur Beterbiev doesn't really get promoted that well. I mean, Joe Smith Jr. seems to get treated well. Vasily Lomachenko seems to get treated well. You know, and sort of people that I guess maybe Bob can relate to a bit more culturally, or maybe he just feels like they're easier, or they're less hassle, or they cost less to deal with. So it may not necessarily just be racial in the sense of, you know, dark skin, light skin, but maybe it's more of a cultural issue. Maybe he's culturally biased or nationalistic when it comes to how he promotes people. Even obviously when we talk about, he said that Tyson Fury put him in the red, but ultimately he didn't diss Tyson Fury for putting him in the red, whereas how he spoke about Terence Crawford putting him in the red was a lot different. Now you might be able to say, well, yeah, well, Tyson Fury done some very good gates for him at the time, but Tyson Fury's only made him money on one fight out of 4 that they've had, and the money he made him still hasn't made up for the amount of money that was lost on the other 3 fights. I mean, Crawford has definitely made him money in the past, I'm sure. I mean, I feel like over the 10 years that Crawford was with Top Rank, he's probably made them more money overall than he's lost them. If you look at it in the terms of Bob saying, he's saying like he lost money on about, what, 5 of his fights, but he's had, I think he's had like 20 fights with you, and you know, he couldn't have lost money on all of them. I'm pretty sure he must have made you a tidy return, because you weren't paying him hugely as exorbitantly as you were like towards the end of the contract. So what about the revenues that you got on those previous fights and those previous deals? Who knows? But it's interesting. I don't think the racial parts of the and the bias, like you can prove it, but that part probably is gonna be the most vague, or the most hardest bit to sort of get to the crux of. So I feel like that was put out there, and I said this in the previous video, it was kind of put out there as like a smoking gun to kind of get people talking and have it be the court of public opinion, and sway that towards like Crawford's side, so that you can get the proper crux of the case, which is loss of earnings and you know, poor promotion, and maybe failure to perform proper fiduciary duties to your client. So I'm going to be interested to see what's happening on that. But look, I'm going to leave it there. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Everyone stay safe. If you're doing anything good, if you're celebrating a birthday or anything, like happy birthday. Like, make sure that you go out and enjoy yourself. I'm gonna be celebrating my boy Wes's birthday on Sunday. His birthday is Monday, so if I don't do another video prior to that, happy birthday, big man. I'll be out enjoying with you. And yeah, everyone stay safe, as I said. And for right now, with Mbaku Panther and the Hardcore Casual, out.